Hello, everybody. Welcome to JVids Gaming, and welcome to this Madden 25 tutorial episode where I'm going to try and teach you how to make your very own expansion team and go through your very own expansion franchise on Madden 25. Of course, it's not an option. Unfortunately, it would be a nice addition as we have seen games like 2K and NHL add that expansion team feature in there, but this is something I've been doing for a long time, going back to maybe Madden 07, Madden 08. I've been, working around the system to try and make my very own expansion teams. As we see here, the finished product. But of course, we have to review the process that goes into, assembling this team. Of course, nothing, an expansion team, you don't expect them to be anything really good. If not, maybe the worst team in the league we saw most recently here with the Houston Texans, as they were the latest expansion team. I believe that was maybe 2002, which seems like a lifetime ago at this point. But this is the finished product of our expansion team. And of course, first things first, you do have to select what team that you want to replace, because you can't add a 33rd team or a 34th team. You have to just replace what the game gives you. So, just scrolling down the rosters here, I think it's best to maybe go to replace a team that maybe not as long established, like the team like the Vikings, the Packers, the Bears. They've been around for quite a bit. So I think, respect to them, you keep them in the game. Cincinnati's still kind of a newer franchise. I think they would be a decent candidate. Although at this point, a few years removed from a Super Bowl appearance, probably not the best team to choose to replace. Buffalo is usually the team I used to start with back in the day when I would do this system, this expansion system back on Madden 07, Madden 08, whatever it was. At that time, there were rumors of Buffalo moving to Toronto, so that's something I would always do. Denver, probably not. They have a good history. Cleveland, a long time history, but just over the past couple decades, nothing doing. So I think Cleveland would be a decent one. Probably not the Chiefs. Colts, not too far-fetched. When the Commanders became the Commanders, they were a team I would turn into an expansion team. But I think at that point they were still the Washington football team, so it made even more sense. Of course, the Cowboys are not a team you would replace. I mean, you could really replace any team, but as far as feasibility, I like to keep it kind of realistic. So I would replace the team. Atlanta, I hear their fan base down there just does not really show up to their games, so I feel like Atlanta wouldn't be the worst team to choose. Probably not San Fran, probably not the Giants. The Jaguars I could definitely see as a team. So if you want recommendations, to kind of implement this system on your own, I would definitely recommend the Cardinals as we're using, maybe the Jaguars. The Lions, a team maybe a few years ago before they kind of became America's team, the people's champ there. I probably wouldn't use them, of course, at this point. Carolina, I was actually all set to use as an expansion team, but instead last second pivot, I went towards Arizona instead, kind of just playing into how the Coyotes there relocated to Salt Lake or Utah there. So I figured we'd do the same here in Madden. But like I said, probably the top recommendations I would say are Cardinals, Jaguars, and Panthers if you want to do this on your own. But first things first as well, so talking about our roster, we're just going to kind of move around a little bit here. We'll start with the players that we keep. So, of course, being the Cardinals, we keep a couple of those guys. So starting out, we're going to keep every player in their draft class, and that includes Marvin Harrison Jr. here with that hidden dev, set to be probably one of the best receivers in football before too long. So we luck out big time as he was a member of that draft class. Who else we got over here? Trey Benson, another player who was selected in, and we're just doing rookies from this past draft. And luckily for us, it doesn't always work out this way when you do this kind of system, building your own expansion team. They had, I think, 11 or 12 draft picks. So we had a bunch of rookies already to kind of build our team off of. And that's Trey Benson and Marvin Harrison, two skill positions on offense who both offer hidden development. We got to make a cut right here. This was just a throw in earlier, doing some trimming here, missed that guy. But as I was saying, it doesn't always work out that way. So who else did we have from that rookie class? We did have a tight end as well, Tip Ryman here. 68 overall tight end. We'll definitely take that. Probably going to vie for major snaps as a third-round pick out of Illinois. Nothing on the offensive line, or at left tackle at least. Then we have Isaiah Adams, a 69 overall at left guard. Figures to be a starter for us. The offensive line pickings were slim in this expansion draft and free agency, so really didn't end up with much. And I'll review the roster a little bit more in depth as we go along. I know you probably see a bunch of random names and not much talent as far as overall rating goes. But as I was stressing on earlier, It's a process to build this team up. Of course, expansion teams aren't going to make a big impact from the jump, although I think the Jags, back what was at the late 90s, early 90s, had a decent run early on in their stretch. So Darius Robinson, another first-round pick from last year's draft class, who we're going to get to keep a D tackle there at 6'5", 285, and as a first-round pick. Wish he had maybe that hidden dev, but not quite, but going to be almost an every down player for us here in year one. As who else do we have from that draft class? I don't think any linebackers. We'd have a couple or three corners here. So our cornerback room was already pretty much built. We had Elijah Jones here out of Boston College, a third-round pick. Max Melton out of Rutgers. I think he was a middle-round guy as well, representing Jersey, as he was picked in the second round. So a second-round and third-round corner to start, as our base roster, plus Jaden Davis here as well. I want to say a fifth or sixth-round pick. So I pretty much, all this to say, this is the base roster that we start with, is our draft class. We had another one here, Dadrian Taylor Demerson out of Texas Tech. And that does it for the rookies. So that's what we start off. And then you got to move on to who do I get to select in this draft. So this is where you kind of get your own say. It's all, user discretion on who you make available in these drafts. And the rules as far as the expansion draft goes, each team has to make 5 players eligible, put them in this expansion player pool. But restrictions I enforce, no rookies, no one who's been in the league less than 2 years. So you have to have at least 2 years experience to be eligible for this expansion draft. Although, in some instances we made an exception or two just to kind of cater to some of these teams a little bit better. You don't want to throw the most talented guys in this expansion draft. Of course, the Bears aren't going to make Jalen Johnson, DeAndre Swift, Montez Sweat eligible when there are key pieces on their team. So instead, we're kind of looking for more like veteran players, role players, guys maybe with a high contract who the team is going to try and look to unload with no consequence. So starting here with the Bears, we're not going to go through every single team, but if you do want the player pool, I can definitely write all these names up into a document if you're interested in trying your very own expansion draft. So here with the Bears, I start off this process by I'll kind of sort here and see who's getting the most money on this team. And, these players, TJ Edwards, 84 overall, DeAndre Swift, 85, Montez Sweat, 84. We're not going to touch these type of guys. But instead here we see DeMarcus Walker, 7 years in the league, 29 overall, and he's owed a pretty decent number there. I mean, a solid rotational guy he has been for the Bears over his career, but still, definitely screams expansion mold, expansion draft mold as a seasoned veteran, kind of there just in the low 70s. So we're going to make him available here for the Bears. Then we'll kind of just go down the rest of their lineup, their roster here. And a lot of these teams, I kind of went with the strategy that they'll double up on positions if they have, the depth. So here for Chicago, we're going to throw Colin Johnson into the expansion pool along with Dante Pettis, both, a 4-year receiver, a 6-year receiver, both there at 70 overall. You already know what you're getting with them. Colin Johnson, that big 6'6" frame, whereas Dante Pettis, a good punt returner, depth kind of guy. But a team like the Bears, they're prepared. Worst case, they lose one of these players. At least, they have a lot of depth, a lot of guys here at the position, as you can see. And more clarification on this process. So we're going with preseason rosters. So when we import this team, of course, we have to play through a full season here. So we're going to go back and kind of, make our own timeline, if you will. So preseason rosters are what we're going with. And if you didn't have, your own preseason roster files saved to work off of, that is kind of unfortunate. Because like I was saying, when we do import this team, we're playing through the 2024 season. So this season that's happened in present day, that's not how it's gone down. We're rewriting history essentially with this. So we're going to start all the way back in this preseason. And it kind of makes it easier to find guys on the roster to make eligible for the expansion draft. I mean, if you want to go with present day rosters, that is absolutely up to you, but I like to start in the preseason, kind of backtrack. As the Bears, we said Colin Johnson, Dante Pettis, DeMarcus Walker there at end. We also made at tight end here, Mercedes Lewis, the 40-year-old tight end, still living the dream, but of course, someone who screams expansion draft. And then the 5th player we made eligible here for Chicago was Khalid Kareem, a 26-year-old there from Chicago. So you see nothing too crazy, a bunch of 70, 60 overalls. Some teams you will throw a little bit more talent out there, We're going to skip over Cincinnati. We'll skip Buffalo. We'll go over here to Denver. It was kind of interesting. So again, like I said, we'll start here. We'll just sort by money. Who's owed a lot of money? Garrett Bowles, Cortland Sutton, both guys who will stick around. DJ Jones, maybe someone you want to make eligible with that $10 million savings, but we kind of overlooked that when we went through, had other options. More depth guys we kind of focused on here with Denver. So really no big contract guys that we ended up putting in for the Broncos. But going over here to quarterback, Jarrett Stidham out here with the $5 million. They brought in an upgrade with Zach Wilson at backup quarterback. So Jarrett Stidham is eligible here as the Broncos put him in the expansion pool. And as I'm going to stress throughout the episode, just a 62 overall quarterback. Probably not someone you're going to pick, but someone that Denver threw in there for you just to be nice, I guess we'll say. Then we go over to receiver. And I actually put Tim Patrick in, 30 years old at 78 overall. So he is going to be one of the better players eligible in the expansion draft. A pretty decent contract here at age 30, especially when you consider Denver. They brought in Josh Reynolds over the offseason. Of course, they already have Cortland Sutton. Marvin Mims, a young guy they maybe want to get more snaps for. So along with Tim Patrick, we did throw another receiver, kind of sticking with that strategy, as I said, as we threw Lil Jordan Humphrey into the mix as well. So that makes Stidham, Humphrey, and Tim Patrick eligible for the Broncos. And now going over to defense, at middle linebacker, Justin Strnad, 65 overall, 28 years old, middle linebacker. Pretty good speed, someone maybe you do consider just to get some speed in your linebacker room, as there probably won't be much available in free agency or the expansion draft. And going over to corner, pretty good depth here. Tremont Smith at $2.5 million. We made him eligible, 70 overall at 28 years old. And that's actually someone we did select from the Broncos in our own expansion draft. So I'll kind of give you an example of how I move players here. And I haven't even touched on the dispersal draft yet. But essentially, actually I won't even jump into that yet. I'll talk about the dispersal draft a little bit here. And I'll say it again, dispersal draft. So essentially, when you make your expansion team, all these players on the Cardinals, they need to go somewhere. So, you could, I guess, just in theory, just release them all into the free agent pool. But instead, what I like to do is a system, as I'll say time and time again, the dispersal draft, where we kind of disperse all these players throughout the league. So what I do is I base the draft order for this dispersal draft based on, this past NFL draft order. So for the 2024 draft, the Panthers were the worst team. So I kind of imposed my own draft lottery. The top three teams, I think it's Carolina, Washington, and New England. They have 13.5% odds to win the number one pick here in the dispersal draft. And then at number 4 will be the Cardinals. I think that's how they do it in the NBA draft lottery. If an expansion team joins the league, they'll have the 4th best odds. So we kind of just followed suit here and gave the Cardinals the 4th best odds. And then from there, you kind of just work your way down the draft board as it would follow up with the Chargers, Giants, Titans, and just go off this past draft order. So we'll skip ahead and just kind of jump into what I was going to do before. So we recognize that going over to the Broncos, cornerback here, Tremont Smith, was our selection from Denver in the expansion draft. So we kind of coincide with what we do in the dispersal draft. The Broncos had the 12th pick in the dispersal draft, so they selected Dante Stills. So in order to just make this a seamless transition, we're going to trade our expansion pick for the pick that the Denver selected in that dispersal draft. And there you go, just like that, you're one step closer to forming your expansion team. But this is something you probably want to do in your offline roster file, there at the main menu. So you can kind of just work in and out of it. It's not as efficient doing it here in franchise, and it won't always work out as smooth as it did there. So just another little example. We'll kind of work our way down the line, and I'll just give you some more examples of the type of players we make eligible. So now Cleveland got really interesting, and we just had to make Deshaun Watson available in the expansion draft. So the 28-year-old quarterback does have that star dev, but it all comes down to if you want to eat that huge contract, which still has 3 more years at $64 million. So if you want to eat that and make him your franchise guy there in the first couple years, I think that's a pretty fun strategy to this expansion team. But we're not going to do that. We're going to try and get our own franchise quarterback, hopefully in the year 1 offseason, maybe the year 2 offseason. But for all intents and purposes, Deshaun Watson is eligible in this expansion pool. Another example of someone we made available, John Kelly, a long-time running back here for Cleveland, but some younger guys ahead of him on the depth chart, and that would not be a huge loss for a team like Cleveland. Then moving down the board, we made James Hudson III available, 25 years old, left tackle at just 63 overall, along with Mike Dunn here at left guard, 30 years old. So someone else that we actually did end up selecting in our expansion draft because there just was not much to choose from on the offensive line. So we had to pick our spots when we could. And let me see the dispersal draft over here. Who did Cleveland get? Cleveland had picked 23, and they selected Chris Barnes. So as I said, we'll just kind of go through, trade these guys, make it a seamless transition. And just like that, we have 2 knocked out there from the dispersal draft and the expansion draft. But as I said, you probably want to do this offline in your own roster file rather than here in franchise. We'll continue to move down a little bit. Here's Tampa Bay. I'll go through another example here. So like I said, we'll kind of sort here through savings, see who's making the most money. All 90s up here. Maybe Robert Hainsey, although I think he is a starter, so we let Tampa Bay hold on to him at $3.11 million. Although Anthony Nelson here at 27 years old, 71 overall, we made him available in the expansion draft. I think he actually was drafted by Tampa Bay, been there for quite a bit, but still, that type of guy, just kind of screams expansion draft. Never going to be great, but a solid overall player. So again, we'll kind of work the system here. We'll trade Anthony Nelson to our expansion team, which is still the Cardinals. And then Tampa Bay, who do they take in the expansion draft? They took a left guard here, Evan Brown, as they bolstered their offensive line a little bit. And there you go, another example. We're just kind of working our way towards the expansion team that we've been building. Other guys available here from Tampa Bay, though. Kyle Trask, 59 overall quarterback. Chase Edmonds, 73 overall running back, we also made available. And I'll continue working down the board a little bit. We'll go here to Kansas City, and kind of an example of how I was stressing. We're working with the preseason roster. So going to receiver here, Kadarius Toney was still on the Chiefs at this point, so thus he was available in the expansion draft. Of course, Kansas City already with Hollywood Brown. They invested in Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy in recent seasons, and Toney, just a little unpredictable, a little inconsistent, but the type of player who just screams expansion draft type guy, and we're going to bring him in to join Marvin Harrison Jr. in our receiving core, which gives us, a nice little core to start with there. And then looking at Kansas City, who they got in the expansion draft, the last pick they selected Starling Thomas V, young cornerback, and again, making that trade. Oh, this one is declined, and that's kind of what I'm talking. Okay, that does make sense. They would decline that, but as I was saying, it's not always going to work out here. So that's why I stress you do this offline, because we want Toney from Kansas City, but they're not willing to give him up for who they selected in our dispersal draft. So we are going to bring in Toney in the expansion draft, but did not quite work out here in our example. Now we'll go down to Indy here, and our selection from them is going to be Mo Alley Cox, a longtime Colt. But again, just someone who kind of screams expansion draft type player, already at 30 years old, 73 overall, 5.4 cap hit, as the Colts do have a few young guys behind them. Going to work in the next era at tight end there in Indy. Other guys available, though, quarterback Sam Ehlinger. A lot of quarterbacks, were made available that were just, sub 60 overall, just because it was kind of easy for a team to throw a player like that out there, especially as a third string. We also made Ashton Doolin available, kind of thought about him, but see, he's hurt, so you would have to work around that. If a player is hurt in your offline file, you're just going to have to find a way once you work into the season to trade them to whatever team they're trying to go to. But I'll show you an example of how to work around that a little bit here later on. Another notable player here from the Colts that we made available was Tyquan Lewis. Pretty decent cap hit for a 29-year-old at 74 overall. Someone you might consider here. Once you get past like 70, 71 overall, these guys kind of seem a little more enticing for our expansion team. Not many of that quality to choose from. Now going over here to the Commanders, and another example of how we're working with the preseason roster. So Jahan Dotson is actually going to be our pick, a little disgruntled there in Washington, and we're going to bring him over to our expansion team. Of course, he was traded to the Eagles, so this expansion team formed before that all happened. Kind of what I was saying earlier, how we're kind of altering the timeline So who do we give to Washington in the dispersal draft? Okay, so they had the second pick from the lottery, and they took Trey McBride, the game-changing tight end. So Trey McBride is going to join Jaden Daniels there with the Commanders as they kind of swap offensive weapons there, but get an upgrade as McBride, one of the best young tight ends in the game. Jamison Crowder also available here from Washington. And I talked about the draft lottery, that dispersal draft lottery, and our results. We had the Falcons take the number 1 pick, and we'll show who they selected here shortly. Now here at Dallas, and we're actually going to go up to quarterback, where we took Trey Lance from the Cowboys, and we're going to see if he can win the starting job. Obviously a bust to this point. Now a change of scenery there in Dallas, but still playing third fiddle behind Cooper Rush. See if he can work into his starting role. And then going to Dallas, we'll have Justin Jones, a pretty decent contract, as the Dallas Cowboys bolster their front a little bit. Now we'll keep going down the board. We're not going to stop at every team, but here the Dolphins, we'll just do another example of who we made available. So we had Jeff Wilson Jr. available for the expansion draft. Thought about him. Also threw in Savon Ahmed there. 2 running backs, kind of stressing what I was saying earlier. You know, teams are going to throw out 2 running backs, 2 receivers in these expansion drafts, as, you know, they're prepared to lose 1. And then working down the board, we're not going to go through every player we made available. Kind of already showed our thought process there. But, of course, as I've been saying, if you have any questions about anything I'm covering in this video, please feel free to comment. I love, diving into this stuff. I love suggestions of your own. So from Miami, we selected Duke Riley, as he's set to be a year 1 starting linebacker for our expansion team. And then in the dispersal draft, they selected Desmond Ridder to try and upgrade their backup quarterback situation there behind Tua with the ongoing concussion concern. So, as you see, we're chipping away here slowly but surely, kind of getting our own guys on the roster. Now going over here to the Eagles, they had a couple intriguing options in 2 corners. James Bradbury, coming off a very down season, a very high cap hit, so he was a prime candidate. As an Eagles fan, I could definitely have seen them throwing him into the expansion draft pool. Also, Avonte Maddox, who we did opt to get because just a little bit cheaper, brought some flexibility to play outside, probably more of a slot corner, but corners were very slim pickings as well, along with offensive line. So Avonte Maddox was the pick here from Philly, as they selected a wide receiver of ours, Greg Dortch, going over to the Eagles, as they select him at 27th in the dispersal draft. And again, if you want me to type up this into a doc and see, they decline that trade, so that's not going to work here in this example. But something offline, of course, you could just force all the trades you want. But if you want any details regarding the dispersal draft, the expansion draft pool, the expansion draft, or anything that's been covered in this video, I really encourage you to ask so you can kind of perfect this system on your own. Then here at Atlanta, who I did say won the dispersal draft despite the 8th best odds, and they made Taylor Heineke, who's an intriguing option if you're looking at quarterback here, as they, of course, have Cousins and Penix in front of him. So Taylor Heineke, one of the better quarterbacks available in the expansion draft. And they also made Kentavious Street available, and that's who we opted for. Kentavious Street. We're going to run a 4-3 system in our expansion franchise series, and we'll introduce the head coach here very soon. I think it's going to be a guy most of you are excited to watch over the course of the expansion franchise series that I am going to be bringing to the channel. And as I said, the Falcons had the number 1 pick in the dispersal draft, and they took Budda Baker, who is going to highly strengthen their back end along there with Justin Simmons, Jesse Bates. So Budda Baker, a lot of flexibility there, and that would put them over the cap. But I did do this already in a different file, and it did work out for us. So Budda Baker is going to be on the Falcons, although it didn't work out here in this example. And we'll skip ahead through some teams to try to get this over with, as I do want to showcase some of the top guys who were available and kind of still go over the process and all that. So for the Jets, we made Allen Lazard available, has that huge cap hit at 22.6. I think just 2 more years on that if you want to eat that with your team, but I think you can do a little bit better with younger receivers available at cheaper contracts. But it wasn't Lazard we went for. It was D tackle here. Solomon Thomas at 71 overall, 29 years old. Comes off a very productive season for the Jets, but they have pretty good depth on the interior now. And the Jets pretty high in the dispersal draft. They picked 11th. And they went with receiver Zay Jones, trying to give another weapon there to Aaron Rodgers. Now we'll keep moving down here a good bit. We'll go to the Patriots, where we selected another quarterback. Of course, they have Drake May and Brissett. So we made Bailey Zappi available. Made a few starts in his day. Going to compete there for the starting quarterback job for our expansion team. New England, 5th pick in the dispersal draft. And they got a very good one here in Paris Johnson. Potential franchise left tackle there as they solidify their offensive line. And Bailey Zappi going to join Arizona. I guess Arizona for now, but we are going to relocate them and go full-on expansion team. And we see there Kyler Murray will cover where he went in the dispersal draft. We had a chance to pick him, but as I kind of talked about earlier, we wanted to go for our own franchise quarterback maybe in the year one offseason, but Tennessee, it's not going to work out right now with that cap room, but we do make it work as the Titans do get Kyler Murray in the dispersal draft at 9th overall. So he went down quite a bit. A lot of teams kind of already settled at quarterback. Can't really take on a contract like that, but we'll review the dispersal draft a little bit more here as we continue to work down the line, showing who we selected with these expansion picks. And we'll go down to the Saints now. Jamal Williams at running back. Alvin Kamara, of course, the guy. Jamal Williams brought in on a pretty hefty contract, all things considered, at the running back position, and just really wasn't as productive as they wanted him to be. Probably the most likable guy in all of the NFL, so we'll certainly welcome him to our expansion team with open arms. And then we'll trade him for who we selected, for who New Orleans selected in the dispersal draft. That's going to be B.J. Ojulari, going back there to Louisiana to play for the Saints. And I'm surprised they actually declined that one. I guess the overall makes sense, but again, something that's not going to work out here. Hence why you need to just do your own offline thing. And we'll just do a couple more teams here down the line. I think we'll just go to Tennessee, where we brought in our 3rd quarterback. That's going to be Malik Willis. Of course, it was traded to Green Bay, but kind of like Jahan Dotson, we're ahead of that in this timeline. So Tennessee had the 9th pick in the dispersal draft, and they went with Kyler Murray, as I said, as Tennessee welcomes a new franchise quarterback there. But it is not going to work out due to the cap, but we do make it work in our own file. So that's kind of the system I use in order to make players available for the expansion draft. Kind of just high contract guys, in the 70 overall. Have to make some good ones available. Actually, we'll go to Pittsburgh here, maybe one of the higher players in the expansion draft here at middle linebacker, Landon Roberts at 79 overall, but still 30 years old, a decent contract. They have a couple guys ahead of him on the depth chart, so I thought Roberts kind of fit what we were doing here. Some guys I might have forced the issue on slightly, but at the end of the day, you needed at least a few decent options. They couldn't all be just 60s and low 70s. You had to have a few mid to high 70 overall guys in your expansion pool. So that's kind of the system I go through. And now we'll move on to the dispersal draft. And then just a couple things I wanted to re-emphasize or mention if I didn't before regarding the expansion pool. So just to recap, kind of 5 players per team, and say, we come down here to a Landon Roberts working off, our official expansion roster at this point. Roberts we selected from Pittsburgh, so we actually could select 2 players from Pittsburgh, but once we select Roberts, they can then protect an additional player. So at that point, we had selected 1, they could take away 1, and then we're left with a pool of just 3 players remaining there from Pittsburgh. But in my scenario, I picked 1 player per team. I think the official expansion rules, expansion teams have to select 30 players in all, and they could select up to 42 in the official, expansion draft as far as, the expansion draft player pool goes. But we just kept it pretty simple. We selected 1 player per team. Roberts here from the Steelers. Jamal Adams was actually one of the few free agent signings we brought onto our team. I know in present day, he actually signed with the Detroit Lions in season. But in our scenario, of course, we're starting in the preseason. He's still a free agent, so we brought him in to play strong safety. Just a few more examples here. Actually, no, we'll jump into some examples now from the dispersal draft. And just to clarify, our guidelines with that. So back in the day, I would just kind of put the team that we're replacing, in this scenario, the Cardinals, I would put them at the top of the dispersal draft. But now I kind of got a little more extra with it. Instead, I made kind of my own draft lottery. included all teams that missed on the postseason, but of course, higher up the draft board, those teams are going to have more odds of getting that top pick. So straight up off the 2024 NFL draft order. So Carolina, they'll have the top odds at getting the number 1 pick in the dispersal draft. Washington will be there at number 2. Then I think it was New England and then Arizona, which would be our team at 4. So like I said, I used to just put our team at the top of the dispersal draft order, but to kind of make it a little more challenging, realistic, I made an NFL draft or NFL dispersal draft lottery where actually the Atlanta Falcons won it. So they got the first pick in the dispersal draft, which of course is the pool of all the players that were on the Cardinals roster, and they ended up taking Budda Baker. It looks pretty legit here, sporting that Falcons all black, as they add another stout defender to their back end, which now features Jesse Bates, AJ Terrell, Justin Simmons. So a lot of versatility back there. I think Budda Baker is a guy you could put in the slot in a lot of different schemes. So the Falcons at number 1 in our dispersal draft, they took Budda Baker. And now going over to the Commanders, who did end up with the second pick. And I think we already mentioned this. They ended up taking Trey McBride, who of course is one of the best tight ends in the league. And now he'll be paired up there with Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels. A nice, formidable set of weapons there to that offense. The third pick went to Carolina, as they actually dropped a few spots. And I had a kind of a quandary here. They could have taken Will Hernandez, strengthen their offensive line, but they're still already pretty well on the interior and a lot of money invested into those spots. So we went elsewhere, and we actually gave them Michael Wilson. They need some youth here at the receiver. I mean, I know they brought in Xavier Legette, Jalen Coker, but still, Adam Thielen, he's 34, maybe 1, maybe 2 more seasons. So I think Michael Wilson is a young guy who can maybe be the number 1 there for Bryce Young until maybe they bring in some more talent in the receiving core. But maybe not the best value pick for the Carolina Panthers, but I think it makes sense to help out your young quarterback and get him another weapon. And then we actually were slated with the 4th pick, but due to the lottery, we dropped all the way to 6. So the Vikings jumped up a good bit, and they were actually 4th in the dispersal draft. And I mentioned Will Hernandez, and that's exactly who the Minnesota Vikings are going to bring in, solidify that front. I think he's a player they would have interest in, as he would go along well there with Bradbury. I don't know who he put at left guard. Maybe Dalton Risner he put over at left guard, Ed Ingram, or Blake Brandel. But even Brandel, they have a lot invested in him comparable to all the other players. And then we'll go 5th in that draft. The Patriots ended up with Paris Johnson, who I really would have liked to pick at 6, just 1 pick away from getting our franchise left tackle. But instead he goes to New England to serve as the blindside tackle there to Drake May, as the New England Patriots, quarterback and left tackle, 2 of the top positions you kind of want to secure. And now they have a 23-year-old at left tackle, already 84 overall, and then a 22-year-old at quarterback at 76, just a rookie. And we're not going to go through all these picks, but we'll just kind of highlight the top ones. And then, like I said, we did get the 6th pick, and some of you might have caught on here in our roster, but Jalen Thompson was the guy we selected. Safeties, corners were very slim pickings. I mean, I mentioned with offensive line, that was very scarce, maybe just 12 offensive line total in the entire expansion pool. And then I said I think linebacker was very scarce, also safety. So Jalen Thompson, he was probably the highest overall of the remaining players. So we elected to keep him, and he's going to be a star safety. Love that development, someone who can play there on the back end for us, then solidify a position that's kind of hard to secure, which I think might actually be a strength of our team between Adams and Thompson as our safety tandem. But we're not going to go too into our team right now. I think at the end of the episode, we'll kind of dig in to our overall roster and review who we have at each spot. But now going to 7th, the Chargers are going to take Sean Murphy-Bunting as they get another top corner here, along with Asante Samuel Jr., a young guy here, and Tarheeb Still. So a pretty solid corner core for the Chargers. Get a look at here Sean Murphy-Bunting as a Charger, and he has that star dev. So it was tough between Murphy-Bunting and Thompson, but safety was a harder spot to fill. And as we mentioned earlier, our Cardinals already had 3 corners that they drafted. So as we mentioned earlier, we keep the draft class that we're kind of dealt with in the team that we choose to replace. Now going over to the Giants, who had the 8th pick. And they went with James Conner, who's obviously going to be their top running back here. Going to try and ease the transition post Saquon Barkley. And I think he makes a lot of sense for them. Not a team who really want to be throwing the football a lot with Daniel Jones. So James Conner is going to be the guy for the Giants. I thought about Kyler Murray here, but in our scenario, the Giants had just paid Daniel Jones pretty much. So instead, we went one more pick, and Kyler Murray ended up with the Tennessee Titans, as I mentioned, as the Titans just going to fully jump ship from Will Levis and go with a more long-term option here as Murray, one of the most exciting quarterbacks in the league, whether you like him or not. And we really did think about keeping him with our expansion team, which is, of course, is a scenario here as you build this expansion team. It really just depends on how the lottery falls out, what teams are going to be interested in Kyler Murray. But when you look back, going back on the draft order, the Falcons, no, they already have Penix, Cousins. Commanders, no, they have Daniels. Panthers, maybe. But the way we played it out, we had the Panthers helping Young rather than replacing him. Vikings, probably not. They just drafted McCarthy. They have Sam Darnold. Patriots, no. They just drafted Drake May, which really comes down to us at 6 if we want to go that route and building this expansion team. But as I've mentioned through this episode, I think we rather look for our own guy here, maybe in the year 1 draft, year 2 draft, maybe in the offseason if someone presents themselves as an option. Then you have the Chargers. No, they have Justin Herbert. Giants, maybe, but as I mentioned, I think in the way we play this out, they're just fresh off paying Daniel Jones. So instead, I think they'll invest in the ground game to try and replace Barkley, which then at number 9, the Titans, a team that's most likely going to snatch up Murray as it played out. Then we'll have the Bears. And after this pick, we'll just bounce around a little bit quicker here, try and close this episode out. And we gave them Zaven Collins, someone we also thought about, but as much as it would have been nice to have a linebacker who can kind of do everything here, Collins can play the run, he can rush the passer, he can play back in coverage. I think he would have been a very nice player to get, but I think solidifying your secondary early on is more important than getting a standout linebacker as nice and impactful as Collins would be. But he's going to go to Chicago instead, play alongside here TJ Edwards, Tremaine Edmonds, as they have one of the better linebacking cores now in the NFC. And then another twist to this expansion draft or this dispersal draft, I also give our expansion team another pick in the middle of the first round. So I usually put that at 17 after the first 15, 16 teams have selected. So on that second pick, we actually were able to select Jonah Williams. So we keep him and Jalen Thompson in this expansion build of this team. Jonah Williams, probably our top rated offensive lineman, 85 strength. Pretty solid across the board, which is something we can kind of use. I think in our dispersal draft, we thought about a few teams picking him and maybe transitioning him to inside, as most teams did have pretty good situations at the tackle spots. The big reason why Jonah Williams fell is because of his cap hit at 19.1, only being a 74 overall. So a lot of teams passed on that combo, but we'll take that. We'll have a lot of cap room to work with. I think by my projection, we'll have around $100 million there in that year 1 offseason to work with when we do start our expansion franchise. So Jonah Williams, we keep him, and there really weren't many other notable picks there in the dispersal draft. Of course, Cardinals, going off the Cardinals roster as that draft pool, I mean, maybe only 8 to 10 to 12 of them going to be impact players somewhere. A lot of them just going to probably get buried on depth charts, but that's just the way it goes. But then you see players like Budda Baker going to the Falcons, Kyler Murray going to the Titans, Trey McBride going to Washington. That'll shake things up for sure as we go along in our own franchise. So at this point, here's the roster. I think we'll go ahead and just officially make this an expansion team unveil where we're going to be playing football. You just go here to manage team. And it used to be a harder process. I was surprised when I came in here to test it out the other day. Right away, they just relocate you. So for the 2024 season, we'll be that expansion team that we do select. And as I mentioned, I think prior in this video, we are just going to go to Salt Lake City as we'll follow the Coyotes there, now the Utah Hockey Club, and we'll follow them to the state of Utah as we follow suit here with the Arizona Cardinals. So sorry, Arizona, sorry, Phoenix, but a couple of your teams just jumping ship for Utah. Not sure how that makes you feel, but then they kind of give you a bunch of teams that you can pick. I used to do the Toronto Huskies a lot when I would play Madden a few years back. I haven't played Madden in such a long time, but I really wanted to get back into franchise. I really do enjoy franchise mode in Madden. although I still stand pat at thinking they could do a little bit more and kind of maybe implement some things from NFL head coach from back in the day. But the Snowhawks is the team we're selecting, so we're going to be the Salt Lake City Snowhawks when we do take this expansion team over. And looking at stadiums, we're going to go with the Spear. They have the Spear there in Las Vegas now. We're going to follow suit here, a couple not too far away here in Salt Lake City, as now we're going to be the Salt Lake City Snowhawks. And we'll go down our roster here and kind of officially introduce what we ended up with from the expansion draft, from the dispersal draft, of course, our rookies, and also a few free agent additions as well. So going to our quarterback room, we're going to have Malik Willis, Trey Lance, and Bailey Zappi all vying for the starting quarterback job here in year one. Hopefully, we don't expect too much from these guys, 65, 64 overalls, but hopefully one can emerge there in the preseason and kind of solidify themselves. Long term, we really only hope that one of them can maybe be a backup quarterback for someone that we bring in there in this year one offseason after we simulate. We're probably going to simulate heavy in year one, work our way to the offseason, which is by far the best part of this game. Love Madden offseasons, love the NFL draft. There's not another draft in these video games like the one in Madden, and I do like what they have added presentation-wise this year as well. Got to say, at least they did something, although there can be a lot more that can be done. In the backfield, we'll have Trey Benson, our rookie running back, who we do keep here as a draft pick of the Cardinals. Now, of course, the Salt Lake City Snowhawks, and we do love that Benson has that hidden development. Behind him, a nice combo of veterans with Jamal Williams, as I said earlier, probably the most likable player in all of the NFL. Gives that power back. Going to probably be our guy there at the goal line in short yardage. Amir Abdullah, another veteran who's kind of resurfaced with Las Vegas the past couple years. He'll be our pass catching back, as Benson Williams, obviously not really known for that. Benson could become a good receiving back one day, but maybe not quite yet. Jamar Jefferson we selected from Detroit, and he'll just be a depth guy, 24 years old. Nick Bawden at fullback, we brought him in as a free agent, going to compete in the preseason for a spot. And of course, Marvin Harrison Jr., probably the best guy, pound for pound, on our roster, going to be a superstar receiver, and we're really lucky to have gotten him as a holdover from that Cardinals rookie draft class. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of picks in that class, I think 11 or 12 draft picks, so we got kind of lucky in replacing the Cardinals. Kadarius Toney going to try and be a wide receiver too, maybe on his last chance here to catch on in the NFL. We'll see. Jahan Dotson also going to get snaps. I'm not sure who our slot guy is going to be. Then Isaiah Hodgins, we bring him over from the Giants, another NFC East guy, 6'3", a little bit better size than Dotson and Toney, filling out our receiving core along here with Tylan Wallace, who we bring over from Baltimore. And then Taywan Palmer from that rookie class. At tight end, Mo Ali Cox, we bring over from the Colts. Donald Parham, we bring over from Los Angeles there with the Chargers. And looking back on it, maybe I would have picked Nick Niemann. And we'll just go to the Chargers real quick. I mentioned linebacker was really slim. And Nick Niemann here at 89 speed, pretty solid. Probably a linebacker we could have used. So looking back on it, maybe I would have taken Parham, or I would have taken Niemann over Parham. But what's done is done. Parham going to be part of our tight end room. And he is the fastest of our guys. And he does have that 6'8", 237 frame. So Mo Ali Cox, a strict blocker, really. Parham over a receiving guy. And then Tip Ryman from our rookie class. We'll get him involved as well. And then Johnny Munt, just kind of buried there. 29 years old, 68 overall. Probably comes down to him or Nick Bawden for a roster spot. At left tackle, we did bring in Charles Leno Jr. in free agency. Offensive line was so hard to come by. 73 overall. Still maybe has a little left in the tank. Much better here than Charlie Heck and Tommy Doyle, both expansion picks. Heck from Houston, Doyle from Buffalo. Left guard, we'll have Isaiah Adams. We got lucky here, a rookie, although just normal dev, but he'll probably start from day one, and hopefully he can kind of develop into a starting caliber left guard as we go along. Zach Thomas from the Rams. At center, we got Tyler Shatley from Jacksonville, going to be our starter at center in year one. 69 overall lineman. We'll take that in the expansion draft. Nick Zakelj from San Francisco. Trey Turner, another guy we brought in free agency to try and shore up this offensive line in year one. But of course, offensive line come the offseason is going to be a huge area in which we try to upgrade through the draft, through free agency, whatever it takes. Michael Dunn from Cleveland, probably going to be a key piece as a backup lineman, kind of moving around the interior. Jonah Williams, as we mentioned, we kept from the Cardinals there in the dispersal draft with the 17th pick. And he'll probably start at least the first 2 seasons, I would imagine. And then we have Christian Jones, who is also a rookie, 67 overall. So depending how it goes, depending how Charles Leno performs there at left tackle, we might just give Christian Jones some snaps there at some point during the year. Anthony Nelson, we picked him from Tampa Bay. We're actually going to throw him at D end. More of a pass rush, or more of a power rusher, can stop the run a little bit, and had really no coverage ability at all. So I feel like in this 4-3 scheme, we'll try and get him upfield a little bit more. Myjai Sanders, a free agent addition, I believe did play for the Cardinals though at one point. DeMarcus Walker, we selected him from Chicago, longtime Bear there. Xavier Thomas as well, a rookie from Clemson. We're hoping he can develop into a nice pass rusher for us there as a speed rusher. 85 speed, 72 power and finesse move. He'll definitely get some snaps, probably in sub packages more. We'll have Nelson and Walker out there as our base D ends. At D tackle, we have another rookie, so we did definitely cash in from the draft. Darius Robinson, 6'5", 285 D tackle, 87 strength, 77 block shed, 76 power move with good speed for a D tackle. A rookie, we were hoping he would have better development, but normal dev will take that. It'll probably be a solid contributor for us, but hopefully we can maybe upgrade at one point. Solomon Thomas we bring over from the Jets. Versatile D end at 6'3", 295. Has really added some weight here. You like that strength-speed combo, 87, 83. Decent block shed with decent finesse move. So with that speed, I mean, you might even play him at D end in your base, even though he's 295. So we like the versatility he brings. Kentavious Street we brought in from Atlanta. Also, Lorenzo Carter was available for the Falcons. Maybe in hindsight, Carter was a guy I would have selected here over Street, but we like what Street brings. Can get after the passer with a finesse move, decent block shed with the 89 strength, 78 speed. So some athletic D tackles we have here on the interior. And then we have Jay Tufele, who we brought over from Cincinnati, more of our run stopper, one tech type guy. Going to the linebacking core, not much from the expansion draft, actually. So Jermaine Carter here and Justin Hollins, both free agent additions, both 28, 29 years old, 67, 68 overall. Landon Roberts, though, from Pittsburgh, actually has that star dev at 30 years old, so probably our biggest cash in there from the expansion draft, as he's one of our higher overall players and does have star dev, which you like to see. Then we have Jabril Cox, Joel, not even going to try and pronounce that. I apologize for that. And then Tay Davis, we did bring him from Carolina. So Roberts and Davis, and then we have Duke Riley here, our 71 overall linebacker, our second highest rated linebacker, going to start on the right side there in our 4-3. So only 3 linebackers selected there in the expansion draft, which just goes back to my point, maybe wish we selected Nick Neiman. I think we could actually throw him at left outside linebacker and have a better starting core here, but what's done is done. So the linebacking core are going to be a very weak spot for us, but hopefully a Landon Roberts there. We're going to go ahead and just make him a captain of our defense. Hopefully he can kind of hold us together there for a little bit. And I go into corner. Avonte Maddox will be our highest rated player. And like I said, James Bradbury was available, a higher overall at 81, but 31 years old, I believe, so he's going to regress a lot. Maddox we could still probably keep for another 2 seasons, and he could play at a decent level for us, primarily a slot corner, but we might need him to play on the outside, although I think with this rookie tandem of Elijah Jones and Max Melton, that'll kind of set us up pretty well on the outside, and then Maddox could play in the slot more so. Artie Burns brought in from Seattle, just a depth guy. Tremont Smith from Denver. Jaden Davis, another rookie. So we already started with 3 rookie corners between Davis, Melton, and Jones. At free safety, we mentioned we kept Jalen Thompson. And we'll set him as a captain as well, along with Landon Roberts there on defense. As we're hoping they can kind of be the glue guys for us. Dadrion Taylor Demerson, a rookie. Let's take a look at his ratings. Another normal dev rookie. So I think Harrison and Benson, the only rookies we have with hidden development, good speed, good pursuit, hit power. So already plays the run pretty well, but I think he has good potential as maybe even a hybrid safety, which he currently is. I mean, we might want to make him zone just to fit that archetype, but I think hybrid safeties are the way to go in this game, even if it's not a scheme fit. And then we do have Jamal Adams, a free agent addition, who does have star dev. So maybe Jamal Adams' little career resurrection here with this expansion team. That's kind of what this is about. It's kind of an island of misfit toys. And hopefully, some of your guys catch on and kind of get back to form or elevate their play when they've been kind of stagnant over their career. Rudy Ford, another free agent addition, as safety was very weak. And then we have Zane Anderson, who we selected from Green Bay. Kickers, you can do whatever you want with kickers. Keep the ones you already had. Just bring in your own guys. So we did bring in Rodrigo Blankenship, the people's champ. As like I said, perfectly fits that bill of the island of misfit toys. So we'll have him compete with Chad Ryland there in the preseason. And then Aaron Sipas, the former Australian rugby player, we'll have at punter. So that's a quick rundown through the roster. And if you have any questions about this entire process or anything that goes into it, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you thought. I'd love to hear what you do differently, who you would select. If you would have went Kyler Murray, maybe you would have went the Deshaun Watson route. Maybe you just keep Cardinals at the number 1 pick, or maybe you don't include them at all in the dispersal draft and just add a whole new layer of the challenge, because this is what it's all about. Team building is so much fun in these video games, but you got to make it challenging. You don't want to just jump in with the top team, and I kind of like to take it even more than just jumping in with the worst team. I like to make it even worse, even more of a challenge here with our expansion team. So I hope you follow along with this series, as I am going to get a franchise series going with our now Salt Lake City Snowhawks. And as I said, I'd love to hear what you think. I'm going to drop a link to a Google Sheets doc, and you can kind of go through the expansion pool, maybe do this on your own. It's a lot of legwork, as you probably can see, but it's all worth it in the end, as it's always so fun building these teams, and starting from the bottom is what it's all about. So if you have any questions, feel free to comment, but this is where I'm going to leave you, folks. Thank you so much for watching. It's been real, and be well. I'll see you next time.